What happens when an ex-Mossad operative tackles the Odessa mob in New York City? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is Mark Rubinstein. We're going to talk about his new book right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast, and on KCAA Radio right here in Southern California. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, today we're going to talk about mystery and the Mossad and novels and how to do the work and all kinds of stuff that has to do with writing a best-selling thriller. My special guest is Mark Rubinstein. We're going to get into it right now on Guys Radio. Let me tell you a little bit about Mark. He's a novelist. He's a physician, a psychiatrist. He's written 8 nonfiction books, including The Storytellers, which is about other mystery writers, mystery thriller writers, and he's gleaned a lot of information from them. He's also wrote the Mad Dog trilogy and Lovers Tango. He lives in Wilton, Connecticut, and he also has a lot of nonfiction books about things like cosmetic surgery and child raising kids and breast cancer. And he's just an amazing guy. So I'm really thrilled that that Mark is on the show with us today. So welcome to Guys Radio, Mark Rubinstein.
Thank you. Thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning. The book we're going to talk about today is the new one. It's called Assassin's Lullaby, and it's I read it, as I mentioned to Mark off camera over the weekend. It's really terrific, and it's about an ex-Mossad agent who's put into a kind of precarious position where he's asked to kind of take out 2 different warlords, if you will, in the Odessa crime families in Brooklyn. And it's an amazing story, and you really can relate to the main character. His name is Eli, and it's just an incredible job you've done on the book. So what inspired your character, Eli Dagan? He's a former Mossad operative, and how did you research him in the Mossad?
Well, Eli Dagan is an interesting guy. He's really more a product of fantasy than anything else. I once knew an Israeli guy who had some peripheral connection to the Mossad and learned a little bit about it. I also have to confess that to some significant extent, reading about Gabriel Allon in the best-selling series influenced me, and I thought it was just a very rich area that I could plumb the depths of fiction with.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did your personal story? Let's get into that a little bit, and then we'll get into the book. You were a physician, a psychiatrist. You've written these nonfiction books for everything from cosmetic surgery to raising kids and emotional well-being to breast cancer. How did you where did it start, and how did you kind of go on this journey and end up being such a popular fiction writer, a best-selling author?
Well, it began with nonfiction when I was approached by a fellow physician who happened to have been a surgeon, and he asked me if I would, he knew I could write and liked to write, enjoyed doing it, so he asked if I would help him develop a book on cosmetic facial surgery and then another one on breast cancer and various surgeries. So I did that. We were lucky enough to land an agent, and the book sold. And then I wrote a bunch of other books with other physicians. So it began with my writing what I called OPMs, OPBs, other people's books, where I was the writer and also contributed to some extent because I was, of course, a psychiatrist. And from there, I just branched out and started writing fiction. And I guess being a psychiatrist where I would hear other people's stories was an impetus for me to start thinking about my own story and stories that I could make up that might be interesting for readers. So it began, by the way, as a psychiatrist in training, I had to participate in various seminars and case history seminars. So we had to read about various patients we were treating. And in so doing, I would even insert dialogue from the patients. And people told me that my case histories read and sounded like fiction. So I got started in a strange way. I got started that way. And one thing just segued into another. And I wrote the Mad Dog trilogy, and it got received very well. Eventually got an agent, and from there, it's all history.
Now, what is the Mad Dog trilogy all about for those who are not familiar with your work, Mark?
It's about a surgeon named Roddy Dolan, who's a general surgeon, and his best friend, Danny Burns, who's an accountant. They're childhood friends, having both grown up in very disadvantaged circumstances. And Roddy is approached by an old friend from their childhood, a guy named Kenny Egan, who has an opportunity for both Roddy and Danny to invest as silent partners in a restaurant. And therein the trouble begins, because the restaurant happens to be immersed in some mafia type activities. And without giving away any spoilers, one thing leads to another. And what we have are two everyman guys fighting for fighting to survive what becomes a threat to their lives and to their families by dint of their having made this rather risky investment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a trilogy in that the first one is called Mad Dog House, the second book is called Mad Dog Justice, and the third is called Mad Dog Vengeance. So each one of the three books circles around a different element of the original investment, which creates more and more dilemmas for these three guys. But after the third book, I figured I had to drop it, because these guys are not lawyers or police officers who are going to have different cases coming across their transom every few weeks or days. So it became a trilogy, and it's being considered in some quarters for being turned into either a TV movie or series.
Now, how did you get the idea of setting the backdrop for that series? And then I want to get on to the new book, but did you know the restaurant business and how it works and how the loans work in that, and how sometimes people take money from nefarious resources?
Well, there's where I had to do a good deal of research, which began when I was about 14 years old. I was with my parents in a very well-known steakhouse in Manhattan. We just my mother, father, and me, and the owner happened to be someone my father knew, and he sat down at our table and he complained. He said, being in the restaurant business means I have 40 paid enemies, referring, of course, to his employees, who would steal from him in every which way they could, whether it was a line chef or a guy who was stealing steaks, or the bartenders who were not ringing up drinks. But there I had to do a great deal of research into the restaurant business and to various scams that are involved in that business. And one thing, it's amazing how once you begin doing research, one thing leads to another. And the next thing you know, you have a very rich tableau from which to choose in terms of, in this specific case, how to make the restaurant business seem very eerie and filled with risk.
Amazing. Well, great job. Congrats on that. Okay, the new book, and my special guest once again is Mark Rubinstein. We're talking about his latest book. It's called The Assassin's Lullaby. And as I mentioned, it's about an ex-Mossad agent who's put into a precarious situation where he's kind of hired to wipe out two guys who are trying to get each other. And he breaks a lot of his own rules. Tell us a little bit about your research for that. Were you familiar with the Russian mob in Brooklyn? Are you familiar with the Mossad? I have to say that your descriptions as a New Yorker, even though I live in Southern California now, I knew every single inch that you covered in New York and in Brooklyn, and you did an amazing job of capturing the fabric and the feeling and the emotions that come with the city, particularly at this time of year, February, which is really a cold spell in New York City. But back to my question, which is, how did you do the research for the Mossad and for the Brooklyn-based Brighton Beach Odessa Mafia?
Well, the Odessa Mafia is otherwise known as the Bratva, Bratva, which in Russian means brotherhood, the brotherhood. And having grown up in Brooklyn myself, I had some familiarity with it, but not nearly the level sufficient to have written this book. So, the internet is a wonderful tool
Right.
if you can use it without getting sucked in endlessly into one thing leading to another. So I did a great deal of research about the Bratva, the Odessa Mafia.
and about the Pacans. The Pacan is the equivalent of a mob boss or a don in the Italian mafia. It's amazing, by the way, how every ethnic group either has or has had its own mafia style criminal enterprise. It doesn't matter what group
Right.
of immigrants you ever go to,
Yeah.
they all have them or had them. So I learned about the Odessa Mafia by virtue of the internet. The Mossad, there are books, and there's one particular author named Ronan Bergman who wrote a book about the Mossad, which was very revealing, apparently without revealing state secrets. But the Mossad is a fascinating enterprise, if you can call it that. They are, along with the CIA, they are probably the premier spy and undercover agency in the world. They operate everywhere. And I learned a great deal about them. And in reading the book, I think the reader learns, along with what I learned, a great deal about the Mossad and how they operate and how they can be as effective as they are throughout the world. Eli Dagan, who was with the Mossad, finally couldn't take it anymore because it was just too replete with tragedy and memories of what happened to him as a young man, what happened to his family, I should say. So he ended up leaving Israel and coming to New York, where he rationalized his activities by saying he'd be a hitman and be involved in taking out evil people. And that's what he did, and that's what he does, and that's where we begin the story in Assassin's Lullaby, where he's contacted by two opposing Pacans, each one wanting to take the other out, each one, of course, not knowing that the other one has hired Eli to do what he's hiring Eli to do to the other guy. So it begins with a bit of a conundrum, and from there things go from bad to worse.
Yeah. It's interesting because they both of these bosses realize that they play it out in their mind and they say, okay, the other guy's hired this guy also to take me out. I better get to him first. So you have a clock going and you have the assassin in the middle and you're trying to guess, okay, what is he going to do? Because you know that eventually he's going to be disposable too. So it's really interesting. And you did a great job as a psychiatrist. I could, there was a lot of showing, of course, and you get into the mindset of the main character. So I want to ask you about Eli. He breaks a lot of his rules by meeting clients in person. He actually kind of has feelings for a woman, and it all goes wrong when he breaks his rules. So why does he break his rules?
I think he breaks his. I'm talking about him as though he's a real person, and I think this about him, or I think that, which is what's really strange. Yeah, it's strange about fiction. You can get lost in the interstices of the character. I know I got lost in Eli. How much of Eli is me and how much of me is Eli is impossible for me to delineate. But I think Eli was getting very tired of his life as a contract killer, as a hitman, and I think he was looking for a way out. And to put it simply, I think he was getting careless. He's 39 years old. He feels his age is catching up with him. He knows he can never maintain the level of finely tuned wariness that he's kept up until now. You got to remember, he's been in the Mossad for 10 years. He's been a contract killer for 10 years. So that's 20 years beginning when he was 20. And it's difficult to keep up that level of intense scrutiny about yourself and about the world around you. Also, given the tragedies that occurred to his family, he doesn't realize it, but he really is hungry for someone to love. And this becomes part of the mix. And I don't want to give away any spoilers here, but again, it gets very complicated for him, although I think I try never to complicate things to the point where the reader doesn't know what's going on.
No, you did a great job. There is psychological factors there. And from your background, obviously you delve into that, into the character, kind of the analysis of his actions and his thoughts and feelings along the way. So great job there. And once
What's
again,
also interesting, Robert, is that at least it is to me, is that each of these two warlords, as you very appropriately put it, one is named, oh God, I've forgotten their names already. One is named
Anton Gorlov.
Anton Gorlov, and the other is named Agapov, Ivan
Right.
Agapov. Each of them has an understandable reason for being the vile villain that he
Right.
is. And the reader, I think, develops a certain level of sympathy for either one of the, especially for Mr. Gorlov. You understand why he's become who he is and what he is. And one of the rules, at least for me in writing thrillers, there are a couple of them. One is to always have a clock ticking. And another one is to not make any character, especially a villain, a cardboard character, to give even a villain a real sense of humanity so that the reader doesn't just write him off and be glad to see him go, if that's in fact what's going to happen.
You did a great job with that. My special guest on Guys Radio, Mark Rubinstein, Assassin's Lullaby is the book we're talking about. Well, you give the reader also, Mark, so congrats on this. You give the reader the ending they want, but not in the way they expect. And I was wondering, as I was going through the book and having written my own novel, The Guy's Guide to Love, which is it's a rom-com, completely different animal. But I was thinking, like, okay, should I go this way or that way every once in a while? And I'm wondering, did you consider other endings? Because I was trying to predict, okay, what's going to happen with this guy, Eli? What's he going to do? And I could see at a certain point that maybe in your mind's eye, you were thinking a couple of different ways it could go.
I was thinking about different ways it could go, and I chose the way I did because it seemed you don't want to disappoint the reader and have what I think and hope is a likable character with whom the reader can identify. You don't want to see that person go the way of all flesh. And I must confess that in the back of my mind, I think I was probably contemplating a sequel. So if I'm going to have a sequel, I have to have him survive the rather difficult circumstances in which he finds himself. And in fact, I've just completed a sequel, but there will be two novels in between, Assassin's Lullaby and Assassin at Rest. So I had to, it's very interesting how in writing the sequel, I had to incorporate elements of Assassin's Lullaby, because 2 books later and 3 years later, according to the publisher, the reader will have forgotten certain very important elements of Assassin's Lullaby. So I have to remind the reader. That's always the problem with a sequel. You don't want to bore the reader who is familiar with the first novel. On the other hand, you have to bring the new reader up to speed without recapitulating everything in the first novel. So
Exactly.
It's a bit of a balancing act.
Well, I think you'll do a great job, and I look forward to it. Let us know when it comes out, because I found this fascinating. And again, as I was talking to you before we got on the show, I picked up the book. I said, I'll read the first 50 pages. And I was like, I got it. I love this. I just kept going because I wanted to know what's going to happen with this guy, even though I had some things in the back of my mind. Well, this could go this way, this could go that way, but pleasant surprises in that. I was surprised along the way, and great job. So, and I guess my next question you already answered was, could there be a sequel? Because I could see it, because there's a couple of loose ends dangling there. It's like, okay, I like this. So great job. And you really did a terrific job. And the thing I really loved about the book, because I'm a New Yorker, I lived there for 30 years, and you got into details and descriptions that only a New Yorker could nail, which is like,
sure.
when you get in the back of an old cab and like your butt, it sinks into where so many other butts have been, and there's a crack in the leather there, and there's Scotch tape or something over it. You're like, you just nailed
duct tape, and it's not leather, it's vinyl. It's vinyl. The seat is vinyl. There's a crack, and there's a depression where 1,000 asses have been before yours.
Just amazing. You did a great job with that. I could relate to all of it, and all the different areas around Gramercy Park where the character kind of lives and hangs out. You
And
really,
Grand Central Terminal, that
absolutely.
which is a world unto itself. It really
This is true.
is.
This is true. Well, you did a great job, and I look forward to the next one. And maybe we'll have you back to talk about cosmetic surgery, one of your nonfiction books, if that's something of interest to you, Mark.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so again, the name of the book is Assassin's Lullaby, Mark Rubinstein. I recommend it highly. It's a fun, fast read. I think you'll really enjoy it, particularly if you like the mystery thriller type of action series. This is a real good one, and I've been pitched a lot of them, and I rarely take on writers of fiction because it's just too much of my time is involved to do a good job. But this one I did. I'm glad I did. You do great work, Mark. So tell everybody where they can find out more about you and your work.
Well, the book will be in various bookstores, but these days with Amazon, that tends to be the easiest mode of access for virtually anything, including, of course, books, which is the way Amazon began. It's available on Amazon either as a Kindle. It's also available on Kobo, on Books a Million. It's available on every platform.
Right.
What else? Any bookstore, if it's not on the shelf in a bookstore, they can get it for you in a matter of a day or two.
Fantastic. Well, great job. Excellent work here. Assassin's Lullaby, Mark Rubinstein. Check out his work. He's terrific. Good job, Mark. Pleasure to meet you. I hope we can do it again.
Thank you so much, Robert.
If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week on Guys Radio and TV, please help out by subscribing to my channels. Thanks for your support.